The blue and red light sliced through the evening air like accusatory fingers. Marcus Webb kept both hands visible on the steering wheel, military discipline overriding the spike of adrenaline in his chest. His dress uniform was crisp, the medals across his chest catching the strobing light. The officer approached with a flashlight aimed directly at Marcus's face. "License and registration," Marcus spoke calmly. "Officer, my credentials are in the glove compartment." "I'm reaching for them now. Hands on the wheel." The flashlight didn't waver. Marcus complied. "I'm Commander Marcus Webb, United States Army. I'm happy to step out of the vehicle." The officer's hand moved to his holster. His nameplate read Dalton. Within 30 seconds, 2 more patrol cars arrived. Marcus emerged slowly, hands raised, his uniform unmistakable in the floodlights. Officer Dalton grabbed his arm and spun him toward the car hood. "You're making a mistake," Marcus said quietly. "Costume doesn't make you legitimate." Dalton's knee pressed into Marcus's back. Cold metal bit into his wrists. "Impersonating an officer is a felony." A small crowd gathered on the sidewalk. Phones rose, recording. Marcus's cheek pressed against the hood, the metal still warm from the engine. His father's voice echoed in his memory. "Stay calm. Survive first. Fight later. Check my identification," Marcus said. "Everything you need is in my wallet." Dalton ignored him, calling into his radio. "Need a unit supervisor. Possible stolen valor situation." Marcus closed his eyes. The handcuffs drew blood where they cut into his wrists. He'd commanded soldiers in combat zones, received commendations from generals, survived 2 tours in active war. "None of it mattered here. I start Monday," Marcus said softly. Dalton leaned closer. "Start what?" "My new position." Marcus opened his eyes. "As your chief." 3 days earlier, Commander Marcus Webb had stood in his apartment in Virginia, packing the last of 15 years into cardboard boxes. His dress uniform hung on the closet door, each medal a memory of decisions made under fire. The Bronze Star for the rescue mission in Kandahar. The Meritorious Service Medal for reforming MP procedures across 3 bases. His phone buzzed with messages from former unit members. "Riverside's lucky to have you, sir. Show them how it's done. Make us proud." Marcus had spent a decade and a half in military police, rising through ranks that demanded excellence beyond question. He'd investigated crimes, managed personnel, reformed training protocols. He'd earned respect through competence, not compromise. Every evaluation rated him in the top percentile. Every commander who'd worked with him wrote recommendations without hesitation. But Riverside wasn't a military base. It was home. Marcus looked at the photograph on his desk. His father in police uniform, 1985, standing in front of the Riverside Police Department. Officer James Webb had served 28 years, enduring indignities Marcus could only imagine. He'd been passed over for promotion 7 times, called names that never made it into official reports, watched less qualified officers rise above him. Yet he'd stayed. "Systems change from the inside," he'd told a young Marcus. "You can shout at walls or you can become the door." James Webb had died of a heart attack 5 years ago, 3 months before retirement. Marcus had worn his army uniform to the funeral, watched the department give his father the honors they'd denied him in life. The new mayor had approached Marcus afterward, planting a seed that took years to grow. Now that seed bore fruit. Chief of Police, the position his father never reached. Marcus would lead the same department that had broken his father's spirit, but he'd lead it differently. New training protocols, community oversight, accountability that couldn't be buried in paperwork. His mother had cried when he told her, "Baby, you sure about this?" She'd touched his face the way she did when he was young. "That uniform didn't protect your daddy. It won't protect you either." "I know, Mama." Marcus had held her hands. "But maybe I can make it protect others." He'd accepted the position officially 2 months ago. The announcement made local news. Commander Marcus Webb, decorated military police officer, returning home to transform the Riverside Police Department. Interviews praised his credentials. City council applauded. Community leaders expressed cautious hope. Marcus packed his father's old badge last, wrapping it carefully in cloth. It still carried weight despite the tarnish. He'd carry that weight forward, transform it into something his father would recognize as progress. Riverside waited. Monday would begin a new chapter. He just had to get there first. "Sir, you need to verify my credentials." Marcus kept his voice level despite the handcuffs cutting deeper. "My wallet has my military ID, driver's license, and documentation." Officer Dalton finally pulled the wallet from Marcus's pocket. He flipped it open, glanced at the ID, then tossed it onto the hood. Fake. That's a federally issued military identification card. Marcus's jaw tightened. The hologram alone, you match a description. Dalton's partner, a younger officer named Hayes, shifted nervously. Suspicious vehicle in the area. Marcus looked at his Honda sedan. Suspicious? How? Don't get smart. Dalton pressed harder against Marcus's back. We got a call about someone casing houses. The crowd on the sidewalk grew larger. An elderly black woman stood at the front, her phone recording steadily. Marcus recognized the neighborhood, 3 blocks from where he'd grown up, where his mother still lived. What's the description? Marcus asked. Of this suspicious person. Dalton's silence answered volumes. A sergeant's vehicle pulled up and a thick-built man emerged. His nameplate read Kowalski. He approached the scene, taking in Marcus's uniform, the handcuffs, the growing crowd. Something flickered across his face. Uncertainty or recognition, Marcus couldn't tell. What have we got? Kowalski asked. Possible impersonation, Dalton said quickly. Stolen valor. He's claiming to be military. Kowalski picked up the ID card, examining it under the streetlight. His expression shifted slightly. This looks legitimate. Could be forged, Dalton insisted. You know how good they're getting with... Run it. Kowalski's tone carried weight. Now. Hayes hurried to the patrol car with the ID. The minutes stretched. Marcus's wrists throbbed. Blood dripped onto his uniform sleeve, staining the fabric near his service ribbons. He focused on breathing, on staying calm, on remembering every detail for the conversation he'd be having soon. The crowd murmured. Someone shouted, "Let him go!" Another voice, "This is wrong." Hayes returned, his face pale. He whispered something to Kowalski. The sergeant's eyes widened slightly, then fixed on Marcus with new intensity. He moved to Dalton, speaking quietly but urgently. Dalton's face hardened. "I'm not—" "Uncuff him," Kowalski ordered. "Now." "Sarge, I'm telling you, this guy—" "That's an order, Dalton." The handcuffs came off slowly, reluctantly. Marcus straightened, rolling his shoulders, feeling blood return to his hands. His wrists showed raw marks, blood smearing across the cuts. He picked up his ID, his wallet, checking that everything was present. The crowd watched in tense silence. Kowalski stepped forward. "Commander Webb, there's been a misunderstanding." Marcus looked at him directly. "A misunderstanding." These officers were responding to a call. What call? Marcus's voice stayed quiet but gained an edge. What was the description? What was suspicious about my vehicle? Kowalski glanced at the phone's recording. "We should discuss this at the station." "Should we?" Marcus held up his wrists, showing the blood. "Or should we discuss why a uniformed officer was handcuffed for driving through his own neighborhood?" Dalton stepped forward, defiant. "You could have been anyone. Uniform doesn't mean... It means something when it's real." Marcus met his eyes. "When it's earned." Marcus sat in the back of Sergeant Kowalski's vehicle, though not under arrest this time. The sergeant had insisted on giving him a ride to the station to sort things out properly. Marcus had agreed, more curious than conciliatory. He wanted to see how deep this went. The city passed outside the window, streets he'd walked as a child, the park where his father had taught him to ride a bike, the corner store where Mrs. Chen still sold candy. Home had always meant safety, belonging. Tonight it felt different. His wrists burned. Blood had dried into dark streaks against his skin. He'd been injured worse in combat zones. Shrapnel, concussion, a knife wound that required 18 stitches. But those wounds came from enemies. These came from the department he'd been chosen to lead. Marcus thought of his father's stories. The time James Webb had been stopped 6 times in 1 month, always finding some reason. The way senior officers called him boy well into his 40s. The promotions that went to men with half his experience and none of his skill. "You'll see worse," his father had said during one difficult conversation. "And you'll have to decide whether to fight back or lift people up. Both matter, but only one changes systems." Marcus had chosen to lift. He'd accepted this position believing he could transform culture through leadership, through example, through policy. 3 minutes on a sidewalk had exposed how naive that might be. The voice in his head wasn't anger anymore. It was calculation. How many other officers thought like Dalton? How many complaints had been buried? How many people had been stopped, cuffed, humiliated without cameras present to record the truth? This wasn't just about him. It never had been. Kowalski broke the silence. "For what it's worth, sir, I'm sorry." Marcus didn't respond immediately. He watched the streetlights pass. "You recognized me from the announcement 2 months ago." Kowalski's voice was careful. "I should have stepped in sooner. Why didn't you?" The sergeant had no answer. The silence filled the space between them, heavy with implications neither wanted to voice. They pulled into the station parking lot. The building loomed ahead, brick and glass and fluorescent light. Marcus's future workplace. His father's past battlefield. He touched his uniform, feeling the weight of the medals. Each one represented a moment of choice under pressure. Tonight was no different. Marcus opened the door himself before Kowalski could. "Let's sort this out." 20 years ago, Marcus had sat in this same station lobby, waiting for his father to finish a double shift. He'd been 17, already accepted to West Point, already planning to escape Riverside's limitations. His father emerged tired, older than his years, carrying the weight of another day spent proving himself. "Proud of you, son," James Webb had said, gripping Marcus's shoulder. "You're going to do things I never could." Marcus had felt relief then. Relief that he'd chosen military service over police work. The Army offered clarity, rank structure, meritocracy, objective standards. You proved yourself through performance, not politics. But West Point taught him something unexpected. One of his instructors, a black colonel named Patterson, had pulled Marcus aside during his sophomore year. "You think running from broken systems fixes them, sir?" Marcus had been confused. "Your file says your father's a police officer. Says you specifically chose military police to avoid following his path." Colonel Patterson had smiled without humor. "Systems don't fix themselves, Cadet Webb. They fix when good people step into the broken places." The lesson took years to internalize. Marcus excelled in military police training, graduated top of his class, led soldiers with distinction. He reformed interrogation protocols, implemented bias training, investigated corruption without fear. He became the officer who made systems better. His father had followed his career with quiet pride. They'd talked more in those years. Conversations that peeled back layers. James Webb shared stories he'd never told before. The fellow officers who'd stood up for him. The captain who'd mentored him despite departmental pressure. The small victories, policy changes, training improvements that had made Riverside PD slightly less hostile than it once was. "I didn't change everything," his father admitted during their last conversation, 3 weeks before the heart attack. "But I changed something. That's all any of us can do." Marcus had been deployed when the call came. His mother's voice shattered. "He's gone, baby." The emergency leave, the funeral with full honors, the mayor's speech about James Webb's dedicated service. Marcus had stood in his army uniform, watching them bury a man they'd never truly valued while alive. Rage and grief twisted together. He'd nearly rejected the mayor's approach, that planted seed about someday leading the department, but his mother had touched his arm. Your daddy would want you to think about it. She'd handed him James's old badge, tarnished but solid. He always said the department needed people who cared more about serving than belonging. 5 years of deployments, promotions, and reflection followed. Marcus returned to combat zones, led soldiers through impossible situations, learned what leadership actually meant. Not authority, transformation. When the Riverside position opened, Marcus applied. His credentials overshadowed every other candidate. The city council interviewed him for 3 hours, testing whether his reformist ideas were genuine or performative. Marcus laid out specific plans: community oversight boards, bias training with teeth, transparent complaint processes. They'd offered him the job within a week. His mother had cried again. "Baby, you sure?" Marcus had held his father's badge. "I'm sure, Mama, it's time." Now walking into the station, blood on his uniform, Marcus understood his father's exhaustion in a new way. The battle wasn't just against crime or corruption. It was against the casual dismissal, the automatic suspicion, the 1,000 small cuts that said you don't belong. But Marcus was trained for battles, and this one had his name on it. The precinct bullpen buzzed with nervous energy. Officers clustered in groups, voices low, eyes tracking Marcus as Sergeant Kowalski led him through. A female officer with Lieutenant's bars approached quickly, her expression tense. "Sergeant, conference room 2 now." She looked at Marcus with something between apology and calculation. "Commander Webb, I'm Lieutenant Chen. I need to speak with you privately." The conference room was standard institutional. Long table, chairs, whiteboard covered in duty assignments. Lieutenant Chen closed the door and stood for a moment, gathering herself. Through the window, Marcus could see officers watching. "Commander, I want to apologize on behalf of the department." Chen's words came rehearsed. "What happened tonight was unacceptable. Officer Dalton acted on incomplete information and failed to properly verify your credentials." Marcus sat down without being invited. His wrists still throbbed. "Incomplete information about what?" Chen hesitated. "There was a call. Suspicious person in the area. Description? Black male, dark clothing, unknown vehicle." Marcus let the silence stretch. Chen's face colored. She understood the problem. The description fit half the city's population. It was a blanket justification, used to stop anyone, any time, for any reason. "How many calls like that come in per week?" Marcus asked. "I don't have exact numbers. Estimate," Chen swallowed. "Maybe 30, 40. "And how many lead to actual crimes discovered?" "Commander, I'm not sure how this is relevant. It's relevant because I was stopped for existing." Marcus's voice stayed level but hardened. "I want the complaint records for the past year. Every stop, every arrest, every use of force incident. Demographics broken down by neighborhood." Chen's expression shifted. She'd expected apologies and moving forward. "Not data requests. Not immediate investigation. Sir, I'll need to talk to Captain Morrison about accessing." "You'll need to talk to your future chief," Marcus interrupted quietly. "Who's requesting records he's entitled to see? Unless there's something you'd prefer I didn't find." The door opened. A heavy-set man in a captain's uniform entered. His face flushed. Captain Morrison carried himself with territorial authority. He'd been expecting a supplicant. Instead, he found Marcus sitting calmly, blood-stained but unbowed. "Commander Webb." Morrison extended his hand. Marcus shook it briefly. "This is an unfortunate situation. Officer Dalton is overzealous sometimes." "Sometimes," Marcus repeated the word like examining evidence. "How often is sometimes?" "Look, I understand you're upset." "I'm not upset, Captain. I'm paying attention." Marcus stood, his uniform commanding space despite the stains. "I was stopped without cause, handcuffed without justification, and injured without consequence. That suggests either individual failure or systemic problem. I need to know which." Morrison's jaw tightened. "With respect, sir, you haven't officially started yet. Maybe we should wait until Monday to—" "I'm starting now." Marcus moved to the whiteboard, erasing duty assignments. He wrote 3 words. Complaint records, demographics, patterns. The room went silent. I want every complaint filed in the past 18 months, Marcus said. Use of force reports. Stop and search records. I want them on my desk by tomorrow afternoon. Sir, some of those files are confidential, Chen said carefully. Union agreements don't protect civil rights violations. Marcus turned. And if you're concerned about what I'll find, that tells me everything I need to know about what's been happening. Morrison stepped closer, his voice dropping. Commander, you walk in here making demands before your first official day, you'll turn this entire department against you. Marcus met his eyes. Captain, someone in this department already turned against me. I just need to know if it's one officer or all of them. The truth hung between them, uncomfortable and unavoidable. Morrison glanced at Chen, then back at Marcus. His expression shifted from defensive to calculating. He was choosing sides in real time. I'll have the records pulled, Morrison said finally, but this stays quiet until you're officially sworn in. We leak internal investigations, it damages morale. I'm not investigating yet, Marcus said. I'm learning. There's a difference. He walked toward the door, then paused. And, Captain, Officer Dalton is suspended pending review. If he's on duty tomorrow, we'll have a very different conversation on Monday. Marcus left the conference room, feeling eyes track him through the bullpen. He'd seen this in combat zones. The moment soldiers realized their new commander wouldn't accept the usual excuses. Some adapted. Some resisted. All eventually understood. The department would be no different. Marcus returned to his mother's house near midnight. The porch light was on and she waited in the doorway, her face tight with worry. The video had already reached her. Neighbors calling, texting, sharing the footage that spread like wildfire across social media. Baby. She touched his face, his wrists, her hands trembling. You're bleeding. I'm fine, Mama. Marcus let her lead him inside. Just scratches, but they both knew better. She cleaned his wrists in silence, the way she'd cleaned his father's injuries over the years. Bruises that appeared without explanation. The split lip after a training exercise. The department never acknowledged what everyone knew. His phone buzzed continuously. Messages from former military colleagues. Calls from city council members. Emails from community leaders. The video had 50,000 views and climbing. Riverside PD was trending. The story was no longer containable. By morning, Captain Morrison called. Commander, we need to meet. Privately. They met at a diner on the edge of town, away from eyes and cameras. Morrison looked like he hadn't slept. He ordered coffee and pushed a folder across the table before Marcus could sit. The records you requested. Morrison's voice was quiet. Everything from the past 18 months. Marcus opened the folder. Numbers jumped out. Demographics, complaint patterns, use of force incidents. The data painted a story Morrison clearly hoped would stay buried. Black residents comprised 22% of Riverside's population, Marcus said, scanning the numbers. But 47% of traffic stops, 53% of use of force incidents, 61% of arrests for resisting. Morrison stirred his coffee. Those numbers don't account for crime rates in different neighborhoods. These aren't crime rates. These are stops and searches that didn't lead to arrests. Marcus looked up. This is profiling with a badge. Commander, you have to understand the pressure these officers are under. High crime areas require more attention. I understand pressure, Captain. I commanded soldiers in combat zones. You know what we didn't do? Make assumptions based on what people looked like. Marcus closed the folder. This data shows a pattern, and patterns indicate training failures or cultural problems. Morrison leaned forward. You walk into that department Monday morning swinging this data like a weapon, you'll create a war. These officers aren't bad people. They're doing their jobs the way they were taught. Then they were taught wrong. Marcus's voice stayed level. And it's my job to teach them right. Morrison sat back, something like relief crossing his face. So you're still taking the position? After last night? Marcus hadn't decided until that moment. The question crystallized everything. Walking away would be easier, safer, justified. But it would also leave the system unchanged, the pattern continuing, the next Marcus Webb facing the same treatment. "I'm taking it," Marcus said. "But we're doing this my way. Full transparency, community oversight. Every officer gets bias training that actually means something. And anyone who can't adapt finds another department." Morrison extended his hand. "Then let's do this together. I'll support the changes, but give me time to bring the department along. They need to trust you first." Marcus shook his hand, recognizing the offer for what it was, a temporary alliance built on necessity. Morrison wanted to manage the crisis. Marcus wanted to prevent the next one. Their goals aligned only on the surface. "Monday," Marcus said. "We start Monday." He left the diner feeling cautiously hopeful. Morrison's support would ease the transition. The data gave him leverage. The viral video gave him public backing. Maybe transformation was possible without burning everything down. But hope, Marcus had learned, could be as dangerous as despair. Saturday morning brought a knock on his mother's door. Marcus opened it to find a young black woman in her 20s, holding a tablet and a determined expression. "Commander Webb, I'm Jasmine Parker, Riverside Gazette." She glanced at his bandaged wrists. "Can I ask you a few questions?" Marcus almost closed the door. But something in her eyes stopped him. The same intensity he'd seen in young soldiers who believed in missions bigger than themselves. "5 minutes," he said. They sat on the porch. Jasmine pulled up the viral video on her tablet. "This has 2 million views now. People are calling for investigations, firings, reforms. But the department released a statement an hour ago." She turned the screen toward him. The official statement from Riverside PD appeared under the department seal. Last night's incident resulted from a communication error during a legitimate investigation. The officer involved followed standard protocols. Commander Webb was cooperative throughout, and the situation was resolved professionally. "We look forward to Commander Webb joining our leadership team and working together to serve Riverside." Marcus read it twice. The careful language, the sanitized narrative, the complete erasure of handcuffs, blood, humiliation, standard protocols, communication error, resolved professionally. "They're burying it," Jasmine said, "calling it a misunderstanding. But I've been investigating this department for 2 years. I have 12 other cases, people who were stopped, searched, arrested without cause. Most were too afraid to file complaints. Some tried and got nowhere." She pulled up files on her tablet, names, dates, incident reports, a pattern that matched the data Morrison had shown him, but with faces and stories attached. A teenager stopped 5 times walking home from school. A grandmother arrested for suspicious behavior while gardening. A minister handcuffed at a traffic stop, despite showing identification immediately. "They do this," Jasmine continued, "and then they write it up as protocol. Misunderstandings, miscommunications. The complaints disappear into files nobody sees." Marcus felt his carefully constructed hope crumbling. Morrison's cooperation wasn't reform. It was damage control. The department wasn't preparing to change. It was preparing to absorb him, neutralize him, turn him into another face defending the same system. "What do you want from me?" Marcus asked. "The truth, on record." Jasmine met his eyes. "You're about to become chief of a department that just brutalized you. Are you going to work with them to sweep this under the rug? Or are you going to actually change things?" Marcus looked at his mother's garden. His father had planted those roses 20 years ago. They still bloomed every spring, persistent despite neglect. Change required roots, time, patience, but it also required truth. "Off the record," Marcus said quietly, "I'm going to change things. But I need to be inside the system to do it. And on the record," Marcus thought of his father's badge, tarnished but solid. He thought of the soldiers he'd led, the reforms he'd implemented, the lives he'd protected by refusing to accept unacceptable standards. On the record, his phone rang. City Council Chair Angela Rivers. Marcus answered. "Commander Webb, we need to meet immediately." Her voice was tight. "There's been a development." 20 minutes later, Marcus sat in an emergency city council meeting. 5 council members, the mayor and the city attorney filled the room. Their faces carried bad news. "The police union filed an official grievance," Angela Rivers explained. "They're claiming your demands for records constitute harassment and overreach. They're threatening a vote of no confidence before you even start." "They can't do that," Marcus said. "I haven't even been sworn in." The city attorney, a thin man named Patterson, cleared his throat. "Technically they can. The union contract allows officers to contest leadership appointments if they believe the appointee demonstrates bias or hostility toward rank-and-file members." "Bias?" Marcus held up his bandaged wrists. "I was handcuffed and bloodied by their officers, which the department claims was a legitimate protocol error," Patterson said carefully. "They're framing your response, demanding records, suspending Officer Dalton, as retaliation rather than reform." Mayor Chen leaned forward. "Commander, we brought you here to heal this community. But if the entire police force turns against you on day one, you'll be fighting 2 battles. We need you focused on public safety, not internal warfare." Marcus understood the subtext. They were giving him an out. "Take the position under the union's terms. Go slow, make nice, let the incident fade. Or walk away and let them find someone more palatable to the status quo. What are my options?" Marcus asked. "Accept the position with the understanding that reforms happen gradually," Angela said. "Work with Captain Morrison and the union leadership to build trust. Give it time, or..." The room went silent. "Or withdraw your acceptance," the mayor said quietly. "No one would blame you. After what happened, stepping away would be completely justified." Marcus looked around the room. These were good people, mostly. They'd hired him because they genuinely wanted change. But they wanted change without conflict, transformation without discomfort, justice without anyone having to admit injustice. His father's voice echoed, "You'll have to decide whether to fight back or lift people up. Both matter, but only one changes systems." "I need 24 hours, Marcus said finally. "To think," they agreed. Marcus left the building and walked to his car. Jasmine Parker waited by the driver's side, her tablet still in hand. "So," she asked, "what's it going to be?" Marcus didn't answer. He drove to the cemetery where his father was buried. The roses on the grave had wilted. He sat on the grass holding the tarnished badge. "I don't know what to do, Dad," he said to the headstone. "They want me to play along, accept their pace, trust their process. But their process is what got you buried early." The evening wind carried no answers, just the sound of traffic and distant sirens and the weight of decisions that felt too large for one person to carry. Marcus's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Just a link. He clicked it. Another video, newly uploaded. This one older, grainy, from someone's doorbell camera 6 months ago. It showed Officer Dalton stopping a black teenager on a bicycle. The same aggressive approach. The same dismissive attitude. The same handcuffs. The description read, "This is my son. He was 15. Nobody listened when we complained." Maybe they'll listen to Commander Webb. Marcus closed his eyes. The decision wasn't about him anymore. It never had been. Sunday evening, Marcus sat alone in his childhood bedroom. His mother had gone to church, needing the comfort of community and prayer. The house felt hollow, filled with memories that now seemed almost naive. The belief that hard work and integrity were enough, that the right uniform would protect you, that systems bent toward justice if you just pushed hard enough. His phone sat silent. No more calls from City Council. No text from Morrison. The silence itself was a message. They were waiting for his decision, but they'd already made theirs. They wanted him, but only on their terms. Reform, but slowly. Change, but not too much. The viral video had reached 5 million views. Comments flooded in from across the country. Some supportive, demanding justice, others vicious, defending the officers, claiming Marcus had been uncooperative or suspicious or should have known better than to reach for his wallet. The usual justifications. Marcus looked at his uniform, still stained with his own blood. He'd worn it with pride for 15 years. It had meant something: service, sacrifice, honor. Now it felt like a target. His father's badge sat on the nightstand. Marcus picked it up, feeling the weight. James Webb had carried this for 28 years, enduring indignities Marcus could barely imagine. And for what? A funeral with hollow honors, a department that forgot him the moment he was buried. Marcus thought about walking away. He could return to military consulting, take a position with a federal agency, find somewhere his experience mattered without the burden of changing hearts and minds. He'd earned the right to choose peace. His mother's voice from the doorway startled him. "I thought you'd be at church." She sat beside him on the bed. "I was, but I realized you needed me more than God does today." She took his hand, examining the bandages. "Your daddy sat right here after bad days. More times than I can count. Did he ever want to quit? Every month?" She smiled sadly. "I begged him to quit. Find something else. Somewhere they'd see him for who he was." She touched Marcus's face. "But he'd say the same thing every time. What? If I leave, who stays to fight?" Marcus felt tears threaten. "I don't know if I'm strong enough, Mama. Baby, your daddy wasn't strong because he never broke. He was strong because he broke every day and still came back." She handed him the badge. "This isn't about being strong enough. It's about deciding what matters more, your comfort or their change." She left him alone with the badge and the decision. The house settled into evening quiet. Outside, Riverside continued its normal Sunday rhythm. People unaware of the choice being made that would shape their future. Marcus closed his fist around the badge. The metal bit into his palm, anchoring him. Monday morning, Marcus called Jasmine Parker. "I need your help," he said. "All those cases you mentioned, the people who were too afraid to file complaints, can you connect me with them?" "Why?" "Because I'm not going to work around the system anymore. I'm going to expose it." By afternoon, Marcus sat in a community center with 7 people, different ages, backgrounds, experiences. The teenager who'd been stopped 5 times, the grandmother arrested while gardening, the minister handcuffed at a traffic stop, a college student who'd been searched illegally, the small business owner repeatedly questioned for suspicious activity outside his own store. Each told their story. Each had filed complaints that went nowhere. Each had been dismissed, ignored, or quietly discouraged from pursuing justice. The pattern was undeniable. "I want your permission to share your experiences," Marcus said. "Not just with the city council, with everyone. Public record. Full transparency. They'll retaliate," the minister said quietly. "That's why most of us didn't push harder. They might try." Marcus met each person's eyes. "But if I'm chief, I can investigate properly. I can subpoena records, interview officers, build real cases. And with your testimony and the viral video, we have enough evidence to force systemic change." The grandmother, Mrs. Williams, leaned forward. "Young man, you think one honest chief is enough to fix what's been broken for 50 years? "No, ma'am." Marcus showed her his father's badge. "But my father spent 28 years trying alone. Maybe with all of us trying together, we get further," they agreed. Every person signed consent forms. Jasmine recorded their statements. Marcus compiled everything into a comprehensive report. Testimonies, the viral video, the data Morrison had given him, the doorbell footage of Dalton stopping the teenager. He titled it, "Pattern and Practice, a Review of Systemic Bias in Riverside Police Department." Tuesday morning, Marcus requested another emergency city council meeting. When they assembled, he distributed copies of the report. 53 pages. Documentation that couldn't be dismissed as anecdote or anomaly. "This is what I'm walking into," Marcus told them. "Not one bad officer, not a communication error, a pattern that's been ignored for decades. Because acknowledging it would require change nobody wanted to implement. Mayor Chen read through the report, her face growing paler. "Commander, this is extensive. It's also provable." Marcus pulled up video evidence on the projection screen. "I'm not asking permission to reform this department. I'm informing you that reform is happening. The question is whether you support it publicly or I do it alone." Angela Rivers spoke carefully. "The union will fight this. They'll claim you're creating a hostile environment for officers." "Good." Marcus's voice was firm. "Let them fight. Let them explain on the record why they oppose accountability. I'd rather have that fight in the open than pretend everything's fine." The city attorney shifted uncomfortably. "This could lead to lawsuits. Multiple lawsuits." "We're already liable for multiple lawsuits," Marcus said. "These testimonies represent civil rights violations. Whether I'm chief or not, these people deserve justice. So I'm just deciding if I'm the one who helps them get it." The room fell silent. Mayor Chen exchanged glances with Angela Rivers. A decision hung in the air, not about Marcus's appointment anymore, but about what kind of leadership they wanted to represent. "We hired you to fix this," the mayor said finally. "So fix it. You have our support, official support, on the record, and the union. Let them file their grievances. We'll fight them." Angela's expression hardened with resolve. "You were right, Commander. We can't change this gradually, not when it's been broken this long." Marcus felt something shift, not certainty but solidarity. He wouldn't be fighting alone. Wednesday morning, Marcus received a call from Captain Morrison. "You went around me." Morrison's voice was cold. "After we agreed to work together." "We agreed you'd support change," Marcus corrected. "You thought that meant your pace. I'm clarifying it means mine. The union is meeting tonight. They're voting on that no-confidence measure. Let them vote." Marcus's calm seemed to anger Morrison more. "I'll be there to address them." "Commander, that's not—" "I'll be there, Captain. Send me the time and location." The call ended. Marcus looked at his mother, who'd been listening from the kitchen. "You sure about this, baby?" Marcus remembered his father's badge, the weight of it. The weight of choosing to stay and fight instead of leave and survive. "I'm sure, Mama." The union meeting hall was packed. 73 officers, their families, union leadership. Marcus walked in wearing his full-dress uniform, medals catching the overhead lights. The room fell silent. Union President Derek Russo stood at the podium, a 20-year veteran with a reputation for protecting his members at any cost. "Commander Webb, you weren't invited." "I invited myself." Marcus moved to the front. "You're voting on my leadership." "I deserve to address that vote." Murmurs spread through the crowd, some hostile, some curious. Marcus saw Officer Dalton in the back, arms crossed, face defiant. Sergeant Kowalski sat in the middle row, expression unreadable. Lieutenant Chen stood near the exit, avoiding his eyes. "You've got 5 minutes," Russo said. "Then we vote." Marcus didn't need 5 minutes. He pulled out his phone and connected it to the projection system. "I want to show you something." The viral video played. The room watched Marcus being stopped, handcuffed, bloodied. Some officers looked away. Others watched with hard expressions. When it ended, Marcus let the silence settle. "That's me," he said quietly. "Decorated military officer. Combat veteran. Your incoming chief. Handcuffed for driving through my own neighborhood." "You matched a description," Dalton called out. "We were doing our jobs." Marcus pulled up the next video, the doorbell footage of Dalton stopping the teenager 6 months earlier. Same approach, same aggression, same lack of justification. "That's 15-year-old Marcus Johnson," Marcus said. "He matched a description, too." Funny how descriptions always seem to match people who look a certain way. He played 3 more videos, different officers, different people stopped, same pattern. The room's energy shifted. Some officers looked uncomfortable, others defensive, but none could deny what they were seeing. "This isn't about one bad stop," Marcus continued. "It's about systematic failure. I have 53 pages of documentation. Testimonies from 7 victims. Data showing clear racial bias in stops, searches, and use of force incidents. Russo stepped forward. Commander, officers make split-second decisions under pressure. You're taking isolated incidents and they're not isolated. Marcus's voice cut through. They're a pattern. Hand patterns indicate cultural problems that training either created or failed to address. A younger officer stood. So you're saying we're all racist? I'm saying you were trained in a system that allows bias to go unchecked. Marcus looked around the room. Some of you are probably good officers who genuinely want to serve, but you've been taught to see certain people as threats by default. That's not your fault, but it becomes your responsibility once you know better. And what if we don't agree with your assessment? Another officer challenged. Marcus met his eyes. Then you should find another department, because under my leadership, we're implementing mandatory bias training, community oversight boards with real authority, body cameras that can't be turned off, and investigation protocols that actually hold officers accountable. The room erupted, voices shouting over each other, some supportive, most angry. Russo tried to restore order, but the chaos built. Marcus stood calm at the center, letting it wash over him. Sergeant Kowalski stood up. Enough. His voice carried authority. The room quieted. Commander Webb is right. Stunned silence. I've been on this force 19 years, Kowalski continued. I've seen this pattern. I've looked away from it. I've made excuses for it. And Friday night, I watched a decorated officer get handcuffed because I didn't step in fast enough. He looked at Marcus. We can vote no confidence. We can fight reforms. We can pretend we're the victims here. Or we can admit we've been part of the problem and fix it. Lieutenant Chen stood next. I'm in. Whatever reforms Commander Webb wants to implement, I'll support them. 3 more officers stood. Then 5, then a dozen. The room divided visibly. Those willing to change, those unwilling to admit the need for it. Russo looked around, recognizing he'd lost control. We still need to vote. Then vote, Marcus said. But understand, whether you support me or not, these reforms are happening. The city council backs them. The community demands them. And I have the authority to implement them. Your vote determines whether we do this together or I do it over your objections. The vote took 10 minutes. 41 officers voted confidence. 32 voted no confidence, split but not defeated. Marcus addressed the room one last time. For those who voted yes, thank you. Let's rebuild trust together. For those who voted no, I respect your honesty. Work with me or work elsewhere. But I won't compromise on accountability. He left the hall. Outside, Jasmine Parker waited with her tablet. How'd it go? About as well as expected. Marcus looked back at the building. Change is never unanimous, but it's happening. It's happening. 4 months later, Marcus stood in the precinct briefing room addressing a full shift. New body cameras were clipped to every uniform. The walls displayed updated use of force policies, community oversight contact information, and bias reporting procedures that couldn't be bypassed. Officer Dalton had resigned 3 weeks into Marcus's tenure, facing civil rights complaints that couldn't be buried. 7 other officers had transferred to different departments, unable to adapt to new standards. But 30 new recruits had joined, drawn by Marcus's reputation and the department's commitment to reform. Lieutenant Chen ran the bias training program now, bringing in community members to share perspectives and experiences. Sergeant Kowalski led the accountability board, investigating complaints with transparency the department had never practiced. The changes were messy, uncomfortable, and absolutely necessary. Captain Morrison had retired, replaced by a captain from Portland who'd successfully implemented similar reforms in a resistant department. The transition hadn't been smooth, but it was genuine. The viral video still appeared occasionally in news segments about police reform. Marcus had become an unintended symbol, The chief who'd been brutalized by his own department and stayed to fix it. He'd given dozens of interviews, always bringing the focus back to the victims before him who'd lacked platforms and power. Marcus Johnson, the teenager from the doorbell video, now volunteered with the Youth Outreach Program. Mrs. Williams served on the Community Oversight Board. The minister co-taught de-escalation training. The people who'd been dismissed and ignored were now helping rebuild the system that had failed them. It wasn't perfect. There were still complaints, still moments of friction, still officers who resented the changes. But the pattern had been disrupted. The culture was shifting. Marcus visited his father's grave every Sunday. The roses bloomed healthier now. His mother tended them more carefully, finding hope in growth. Marcus would sit with the tarnished badge, now displayed in a case in his office, and report the week's progress. "We're getting there, Dad," he'd say. "Slow, but we're getting there." His mother joined him one Sunday. "Your daddy would be proud." "I hope so." Marcus touched the headstone. "I'm just doing what he taught me. He taught you to survive. You're teaching them to change." She squeezed his hand. "That's different. That's better." Marcus stood, feeling the weight of the past 4 months. The exhaustion. The battles. The small victories that accumulated into transformation. He wasn't naive anymore about how hard change was. But he wasn't defeated by that difficulty either. The department still had far to go. But it was going. And Marcus would be there every step, pushing, demanding, refusing to accept good enough when better was possible. He walked to his car, passing the park where his father had taught him to ride a bike. Kids played there now, a mix of races and backgrounds, watched by officers who'd been trained to protect rather than suspect. It wasn't the world his father had known. It was the world Marcus was building, one policy, one officer, one choice at a time. Marcus stood at the precinct's morning briefing 6 months after taking command. New recruits filled the front row, their faces reflecting hope and determination. Behind them sat veterans who'd chosen to stay and change. The room hummed with different energy now, not perfect, but purposeful. "My father wore a badge for 28 years, Marcus began. "He endured things I'm only beginning to understand. He stayed in a system that broke him daily because he believed someone had to, that if he left, things would only get worse for those who came after." He held up his father's tarnished badge, now mounted in a glass case. He was right. Systems don't change because we abandon them. They change because people stay in the broken places and refuse to accept broken as normal. Marcus looked around the room. "Every day you make choices, to see people or see threats, to protect or control, to serve communities or police them. Those choices define what this badge means." He set the case down gently. "Some of you came here wanting to make a difference. Some came for stability, for purpose, for family tradition. Those reasons are valid, but none of them matter if you forget that every person you encounter is someone's child, someone's parent, someone who deserves dignity even in difficult moments." A young recruit raised her hand. "Chief, what if we make mistakes?" "You will," Marcus said honestly. "Everyone does. The question is what you do after. Do you hide the mistake, justify it, or do you acknowledge it, learn from it, and do better? Next time." He walked to the window overlooking Riverside's streets. "This city is watching us, some with hope, some with justified skepticism. We earn their trust by being worthy of it, by holding ourselves to standards higher than the minimum, by remembering that we serve people, not power." Marcus turned back to his officers. "I was handcuffed on these streets because officers made assumptions instead of assessments. I could have walked away. Let this department continue failing. But my father taught me that walking away from broken systems just leaves them broken for someone else." He picked up his own badge, the one he now wore daily. "This isn't just metal and authority, it's a promise. To protect without prejudice, to serve with integrity, to build the department our community deserves rather than defend the one we inherited." The briefing room sat silent. Then Sergeant Kowalski stood. To Chief Webb and the work ahead. The room rose. To the work ahead. Marcus dismissed them, watching officers head to their shifts with body cameras active and accountability real. The transformation wasn't complete. It never would be. Change was continuous, requiring daily choice and constant vigilance. But it was happening. The pattern had been broken. The culture was shifting, and Marcus stood at the center of that shift, carrying his father's legacy forward into possibility. Outside, morning light caught the roses in the memorial garden, planted 6 months ago in James Webb's honor. They bloomed vibrant and persistent, proving that growth was possible even in difficult soil. Marcus touched his badge one more time. Then he walked into the day's work, knowing that justice wasn't a destination, it was a direction, and every day he chose to move toward it. The uniform didn't make you worthy. How you wore it did, and Marcus wore it with purpose, with integrity, with the weight of those who'd come before, and hope for those who'd come after. The work continued, the change deepened, and Riverside transformed, one choice, one officer, one moment at a time.